r/AskReddit. Teachers. What's the most disturbing thing you've confiscated off a student? One of my students turned in an assignment on a flash drive with a bunch of BDSM porn on it. No, it wasn't intentional. And this is why the smart kids always have a flash drive for schoolwork only. It's hard to tell which is the schoolwork porn drive and which is the schoolwork drive though. A cannonball. It was in their locker. I guess it's not really disturbing. But it is odd. What? Did you ever find out why? Were they secretly a pirate after school? I swear Mr. Miller, I'm not a pirate. Me, I just have a fetish for large metal balls.
Claim your free AirPods today by clicking the first link in the description down below.
I once took a note. Two girls were passing back and forth. They were talking about telling the principal I ate them because they didn't like being in study hall as I didn't allow them to talk in study hall. That's horrible. Please tell me you reported them. Yep. Another teacher took the note and girls to the office and they were both suspended. My mom was a teacher and she had to take a lighter away from a student after he lit his test on fire. Did he get an F for fire? No, an A for arson. I remember there was a report of a student having a gun in his backpack and he reached for it, but the teacher broke the kid's hand with one of the textbooks before he could get to it. Once defended a kid who brought a gun to school. The kid next to him saw it in his bag, told his friend, and one of them jumped on top of him while the other grabbed the bag and ran out of the room. Teacher started yelling at them for horseplaying class until he figured out what was really going on. Turned out that the kid wasn't planning any trouble. Just had an unstable living situation, semi-homeless, and didn't know what else to do with his stuff other than carry it with him. Still caused an ungodly amount of trouble. I remember my uncle talking about how he accidentally left his rifle in his truck and how he told the principal about it and he said to just take it home. Human finger. She insisted she'd found it by the ravine and just thought it was cool so kept it until she'd decided what to do with it. But that means she'd either found a lone finger or she was leaving out a part of this story. You gotta hand it to her. Edit. Awesome. Never had a top comment and of course it's on some pub. I love you all. There should be more to that sentence, but I can't quite put my finger on what's missing. My two female classmates had a nice idea to bring matches and rubbing alcohol to school in 8th grade. They had a plan to lure a bully girl to a secluded area outside the school, pour bottles of rubbing alcohol on her from a tree and light her on fire. The only reason they got caught is because instead of leaving their backpacks in their classroom for an assembly, they brought them to the assembly room and some kid tried going through them to steal from them. They didn't admit when caught, but like 2-3 years later. Edit. Because of the replies. This was 2002. Barely after Columbine. They only got a 4-day suspension. In 08 I heard one was a meth addict. The other unknown. The girl who was gonna be lit was still a bully to everyone after. Murder by immolation. That's some twisted hit right there. I hope they were tried and convicted as adults. Kudos to the thief for stepping up and admitting wrong while also doing the right thing and saying something about what he found. Nope. Just suspended for 4 days. This was 2002. They were 12 and 13. I'm not a teacher, but I was in a class once and a teacher went to take a phone away from a student when he heard it vibrating. When he walked over to her he said, "Hand it over." She was so embarrassed because she wasn't using her phone. Her vibrator just started going off. A few kids laughed, but the teacher was the most embarrassed alongside the girl. Holy duck, that's hilarious, but why the hell would someone take their vibrator to school? It would prevent snooping parents from finding it in your room. 2 huge hunting knives from a 1st grader. Blades were 6 inches long and one was locked open. He had taken them from his dad's hunting gear and was showing them off in the boys' bathroom. His mom had passed when he was 4 and his dad was doing the best he could to raise and provide for 3 kids. That's kind of sad honestly. He just wanted to show off an interest. And he was young, so that interest happened to be allowed, and he didn't know. You're right. His punishment was age appropriate and his circumstances influenced how he was dealt with. I think he got into more trouble at home than he did with us. Adjudicated youth. First day. Dropped a bag of pot out of his pants. This was 20 years ago. It was his last chance after a string of several incidents. None of which included drugs. I never turned him in. He graduated the program. He's married with children and has a great job. Good on you. The guy probably thinks about it time and time, what you done for him. Maybe reach out. With that said, I despise overzealous teachers. Or whoever have authority who would ruin someone's life over petty stuff like a bag of weed. How mundane your life must be to ruin someone for a small thrill. We are Facebook friends. I'm closer to his mom than him. She knows the secret. Haha. Kid just made bad decisions at times that got him caught a lot. He would have spent nearly 3 years in juvenile if I turned him in. I was with a VP as we searched a girl's bag and we found a burner phone, $3,000 cash, and her black book of clients. She was 18, so not much we could do, but man, it made it real when you consider she had a book with about 20 men's names in it and what they liked. Second weirdest was the kid who brought 3 fish he had caught that morning. He just wanted to kill them. Like didn't catch them for food, but just to kill them. Those two stories are about as different as they come despite both being about hookers. Edit. Holy crap. My first gold. Thanks anonymous redditors. Dude, I love the pun. Student had brought a puzzle to school, but the pieces didn't match. Turned out it was a single piece from all the puzzles we kept at school, making every single one of them unsolvable. That evil little hit. Satanica Rasputin? Present. Obligatory, not a teacher. But I was in art class when my teacher told a student to throw a note she was passing around away. The note was a super graphic love letter sent by this girl's boyfriend, detailing how he'd duck her asshole and a bunch of bondage type hit. The weirdest part was this girl didn't have any friends in that class. She just stood up and passed it around to the popular kids, like she was proud of it. This girl was pretty out there, so our teacher didn't even have a reaction to it at that point. Art kids SMH. As a recovering art kid. Yup. A cat. One of my students brought his cat to school zipped up in his sports bag. Poor little thing. I remember in high school, someone brought a cat, Stray, to school in a book bag. Then the ducker brought some friends in and kicked the hit out of it. When the ag teacher found out, she took that cat and cared as best as she could. In the end, the poor thing had to be put down. Edit. Some people are questioning the validity. Why would I make that up? LMAO. Also shout out to every who is posting their happy animals at school stories. Edit 2. It happened years ago. Being salty over it won't change the fact that it happened. Also, holy hid, my highest comment is about some cum dribbles killing a cat. TF. Keel posting your happy animals stories. Yo. Were the kids punished? I worked as a percussion instructor, think an assistant marching band director, but just for the drummers, for several years. There was one student who was a kind of tertiary friend. He had a circle of friends, but he was on the outer edge of that circle. A bit of a loner. Quiet and sensitive. Really nice. A bit of a clown. Intelligent and insightful, but without direction or drive. At the end of the marching season, it came time to turn in all the music binders. I was going through and making sure all the music that had been handed out had been turned back in, and I'd found a handwritten suicide note that had gotten left in the binder. That was about 6 years ago and he's fine. But it was the single biggest adversity I ever had to overcome in my time in the field of education. Did you panic when you read it? Who was the first person you told about it? I didn't panic. I was in shock. The first thing I experienced was disbelief. The kid was a jokester. Always laughing. In hindsight, he was basically Robin Williams. I notified his guidance counselor, but otherwise kept the information to myself. I kept a closer eye on him from that point on, but his demeanor never changed. The guidance counselor never had to do anything, and whatever it was the student was dealing with, he dealt with it on his own terms. Or in such a way that I never heard about it. Not my story, but my psychology teacher used to work with underprivileged kids. One student, maybe 8 years old, really enjoyed his class and gave him a jar as a gift. What's in the jar? Jelly? Jam? No. The teacher noticed cuts all over the boy's arms and slowly puts the jar down. It was full of old/new blood. Completely filled. He figures that the kid saw it as a part of him and probably saw it as something very symbolic and meaningful. He says he was told when he started to never look up the kids he worked with because very few times is it a happy ending. The teacher's a great person. I imagine he just got a counselor and had an ambulance check the kid out and dispose of the jar. The kid's mother was also a drug addict. My god. That's so sad. Knowing the people you're helping are probably never gonna make it in life. I don't know how your teacher did it. Probably knowing that you get to give them the best life possible. A hand-drawn tentacle porn hentai comic. Was it at least well drawn? It was okay. Kindergarten teacher found a needle in a boy's lunchbox. Turns out it was a used heroin needle that parents packed by accident. The boy now lives with his grandparents. The mother came in after losing custody and screamed at me for ruining her life and stealing her child. I calmly called school security and she was escorted off campus. Very bright boy is now in 2nd grade and his grandparents are an absolute delight. He is now in very loving hands. Edit. Small grammatical errors. Even teachers make grammar mistakes, you twats. Lol. I can just imagine a heroin addicted parent packing lunch for their child. Regardless of how low you think of the mother, the thought of it really tugs at your heart. Hope she got help. Not a teacher. A class picture fell out of a girl's desk who was in our class. This was when I was in grade 8, so 2003. It said on the back of the picture, people I want to kill. All the popular people were circled on it, and for some reason I was too. I was shocked she thought I was popular. Felt pretty cool for the first time to be included with those kids. All in all, a good day. Oh. We turned it into the teacher. They didn't do anything about it. Our high school, you learn you might get murdered, but more importantly people think you're cool. It's the important things that matter back in those days. Not a teacher. But when I was in 5th grade, our teacher tripped over a kid's backpack. She was like, "Why do you have him there? Bricks?" And he really did have bricks in there. My crazy mom thought it would be cool to give me a coconut and a knife for lunch one day. I got in trouble for having a knife. 2nd grade. I was just hungry. She thought it would be a cool thing to bring to school. Nowadays you would get in trouble for having a coconut. Well, you know. Because of the implication. You don't wanna know how often I explained to middle schoolers that having nudes of each other on their phones and passing them around constituted child pornography and that they could be charged. Had this happen at a neighboring school. Hundreds of high schoolers were involved. At first they tried to confiscate phones they knew had them. One kid even broke his phone completely to avoid trouble. Team player. But eventually they gave up and made a big announcement that they didn't want to charge a bunch of high schoolers with child pornography because it wasn't intended for those kinds of incidents. Thank God someone gets it. I remember when I was in middle school, a fellow 8th grader's dad was a tattoo artist. Somehow this kid had managed to bring his dad's tattoo equipment to school and it was confiscated when he tried to tattoo another kid whilst his friends held this kid down. Pretty sure it was going to be a forced tattoo, but a teacher was walking by and heard the screams and stopped it. Little pieces of hit. Hope they were punished sufficiently. 2 of them had to be put down. Random search turned up an ice pick. Good times. Was this in Mexico? South Central Los Angeles. But I can see where you could make that mistake. Had to take about a dozen condoms from a 3rd grader once. He was getting them from the older kids after school and playing with them. He had no idea how to use them, but he sure liked blowing them up like balloons. Damn man. Let the kid enjoy his balloons SMH/S. I accidentally brought my camping bag to school with me once. It was the day after a 1-week camping trip and my camping pack looked very similar to my school pack. I had 2 Leathermans, a pocket knife, multiple fire starters, small game traps, box of ammo. I realized after I got to study hall first thing in the morning. That bag was not opened, or even left my back till I got home. Students attached human hair to a piece of paper with band-aids. It was very creepy. Doesn't Helga do this in Hey Arnold? There was a girl in my English class who always drew big titty anime girls in her notebook. I'd be grading essays and then open up her notebook and bam, some random waifu would be popping out at me. One day I noticed she was distinctly shielding her notebook from my eyesight as I walked around the class. I figured she was drawing something dirty again and just decided to ignore it. I'd deal with it at the end of class. The bell rang, and I called her over, and was going to talk to her about how it was inappropriate, and that I had saw everything she had been doodling. Except for this time. It wasn't a doodle. It was a suicide note. It was written to a bunch of random kids on Instagram, who were evidently her only friends. She had never even met them. Well, we had a long talk about how she mattered, and it was unfair to take herself away from those who cared about her. I pointed out that a boy in the class had an obvious crush on her, and that people thought she was cool because she always dressed goth and kept to herself. I referred her to the counselor. She ended up dating the boy who had a crush on her and passing my class. Haven't seen her in years, but I hope she's doing well. Wholesome story. Woo. A nice relief. I was getting worried there. I was really worried at the time too. A lot of kids need someone to reach out to them and let them know that they're cared about. They get down on themselves and then their depression tricks them into thinking that nobody cares about them and everyone hates/dislikes them. Bullying can really exacerbate it too. Sometimes they don't get attention or love at home, and they can also be oblivious to how people feel about them. Telling her that the kids thought she was cool shot her confidence up by like 200%. She still was the shy type, but was no longer afraid to contribute to class and started making friends. Sometimes all it takes is one conversation. Former 4K teacher here. On the first day of school I had to take away a shotgun shell from a 4-year-old. The second day it was a lighter from the same kid. I was only a 720p teacher. Most people said I ran better, but it's all fuzzy now. IDK though. Edit. Thank you for the gold whoever you are, holy hit. Hey. At least you were considered HD.